Hey, what's going on, everybody? Max here with BB, and today for 10 Minutes Max, we're going to be talking about IWM, which is the Russell 2000 ETF, small caps in the US equity markets, what it's telling us, and how that could translate over into crypto. Before we get into it, guys, do me a solid. Please consider liking the video and also subscribe to the channel if you are new here. We are growing so quickly, and it is all thanks to your guys' consistent support of what we are building here. So right here, we have IWM, which I just mentioned is the iShares Russell 2000 ETF. So this is all your small and mid cap companies here in the US. And the chart looks a lot different than that of, like the NASDAQ. So for example, most people that are not active US equity market traders, they're looking at the NASDAQ, right? And the NASDAQ is, very highly concentrated into mega cap tech. Obviously, it's well into price discovery, right? Like here's the previous all-time high right over here. Both the NASDAQ and the Russell topped in end of 2021. So you can see that the NASDAQ has been leading US equities dramatically, and the S&P 500, since we're going down that rabbit hole, has also been performing much better than small and mid caps, right? Well into price discovery. And I would argue that the same thing could be said about crypto, right? Like the NASDAQ is well into price discovery, and Bitcoin, as we've talked about, and I'm sure you guys are following, is still sitting basically around its previous cycle all-time high. So anyways, setting the stage a little bit, the NASDAQ is lagging, but something kind of interesting has happened recently where this is the ultra high time frames here. The NASDAQ is basically trying to break out here, or I would argue has already broken out, and it's been reaccumulating basically for 800 days, and it's now broken out, okay, or hopefully a breakout. We're going to talk about potentially what this means and why it actually matters for crypto. All right, so let's do a little bit of TA here on the Russell, but hang with me. I know some of you guys are exclusively crypto. I'm mostly crypto, but there's a really compelling case that the NASDAQ has been leading, and the Russell is telling us that crypto is about to go crazy. So hang with me while I paint this argument for you guys, but we're going to mark up the chart a little bit, and we're going to compare the Russell to where it was at last cycle around this time. So last crypto cycle, we're going to mark out the previous all-time high right here for the Russell. So we'll put this here, and we'll label this previous all-time high. All right. So we're going to apply a little bit of context to where small cap and mid cap companies were at last cycle before we got into a crypto bull market. All right. So now let's do the same for where we're at right now. So this is the previous all-time high, which we still haven't gotten above. And now we're going to mark up the chart a little bit further. And we're actually going to add on a couple pairs down here. So I already did this, but this is IWM divided by the NASDAQ. All right. So here's IWM divided by the NASDAQ, and I'll explain what this is for everybody that is newer here and doesn't pair trade too much. So what this chart is right here, and I'll just remove the actual Russell up here. This right here is IWM divided by the NASDAQ. So this is small cap and mid cap companies, or the ETF for them, divided by basically a highly concentrated mega cap tech index where it's very heavily weighted. NVIDIA, Apple, Amazon, Google, etc. Okay, so as you can see, it's been a horrible investment basically forever, going all the way back to 2007. It's been trending straight down in a straight line. So what does that mean? If this chart is moving down, that means that the NASDAQ is a better investment than IWM or the Russell. If it's moving up, then that means that small caps are actually outperforming that of mega cap tech. All right, and it's better to hold IWM. Now, as you can see on the higher time frames, it's been horrible. You do not want to be holding much size of small caps versus mega cap tech. But there are small periods of time where it can actually be somewhat lucrative, right? So let's actually mark out like when it's been historically good to hold small caps versus mega cap tech. All right. So as you can see right here, and this is just the IWM up top, and then we're going to add some crypto on here. Basically, well, it was in its bear market all the way from 2018 through November of 2020 until it went into price discovery here, middle of Q4 2020. The IWM was bleeding aggressively against the NASDAQ. But then what we saw here was, more or less a shift of trend, right? We could look at it kind of like this, right? We saw, a break, basically it bottomed out, okay? So it's not exactly perfect, right? Like I would never necessarily chart this like one-to-one. You could maybe, try to go back further and we can definitely find a trend line, right? Like it works, there is a trend line there. But point being is this pair bottomed, okay? This pair put in a capitulatory bottom during COVID. And then you actually saw a small period of time where IWM outperform that of the NASDAQ. All right. So what are we potentially seeing right now? I'm going to go back down to the lower time frames just a little bit here. All right. So now what we're potentially seeing is something similar. All right. So let's mark this chart up a little bit here. Are we potentially seeing a bottom here on IWM versus the NASDAQ? Well, it's maybe a little bit early to call it, right? But let's actually mark this up a little bit further and let's potentially see. So what we know last cycle is we were, chopping under the previous all-time high, finally broke through it when this pair bottomed. So if this pair is bottomed or close to bottoming, right, like maybe we're coming out of a capitulation event for IWM versus the Russell, it would potentially allude to us being somewhere like around here, right? Kind of in this final stage before it goes into price discovery. If IWM versus the Russell is going to have a little bit of an uptrend, which, it's certainly possible, right? It's definitely possible. So let's actually move this up so we give ourselves a little bit more room. Then we're going to overlay crypto with this as well to see how that looks, because there's some very interesting market dynamics at play that I believe are worth discussing. All right. So if this pair is bottomed, which, again, big if we need to see, then it would potentially allude to us being somewhere around here. Now, this fractal actually kind of looks similar as well, right? Like this part, there was like 3 highs and then it went into price discovery. So something like, maybe like a slightly elongated version of, of this. There's kind of these like 3 highs right over here. 1, 2, 3. And then again, 1, 2, 3, and then it kind of starts to pop up right as you're seeing IWM NASDAQ actually correct. And maybe just it's a dead cat bounce or something like that. But now let's put Bitcoin on there. All right. So now here's Bitcoin. So let's see potentially where we are at within this broader cycle, right? Let's take a look at it. So here's Bitcoin down below. We'll change this to the weekly time frame. All right, and I'll move this chart down here. So up top, we've got the Russell breaking out of an 800-day range potentially. You've got the IWM NASDAQ pair signaling, hey, I'm potentially bottomed here. It's rallying hard off of this sort of deviation low, right? So you could maybe even look at it like this. If I just zoom in, it almost kind of looks like a PO3 of some sort, right? Like this is your bottom. Here, I can just remove this for now. It is breaking that little diagonal trend line, but the traders would look at this as like, deep value, right? Like some sort of deviation of this pair. And if it is going to expand to the upside, similarly to what it did over here in, November of 2020, right as we're looking like we're going to head, into price discovery, it could be signaling what I'm about to show you for crypto. All right. So let's readjust these charts a little bit. Here we go. All right, I can remove this fractal. So here's Bitcoin down below. And now let's see where Bitcoin was at, basically at this point in time, right? Let's mark out the previous all-time high. All right, so this was the previous all-time high for Bitcoin, previous all-time high. And then we're going to mark out its current spot, and we're going to put down previous all-time high. So what do we notice right here? What do we notice about all of this, right? It's that when the NASDAQ begins to underperform IWM, or I guess just another way to put it is small caps and mid caps begin to outperform that of the NASDAQ, you start to see this pair temporarily recover. And last cycle, it lasted, let's take a measured move here, basically from when like the breakout really began into price discovery for the Russell. It lasted about 140 days, right? So not that long, and it didn't actually high time frame correct for another year, right? So it just went into distribution, but let's just say 140 to a year, 140 to 300 days conservatively. As soon as this pair IWM versus the NASDAQ began to bottom and actually outperform, we saw both the Russell and Bitcoin go into price discovery, right? And the Russell's getting very, very close, right? Like the all-time high for the Russell is 244, and right now it's at 222. Like it's, a couple good weeks away from price discovery. We're 10% out roughly. It's not that crazy. So to me, contextually, what this is telling me is that the Russell is more or less like total 3 of legacy, right? When people get really risk on and they want to start bidding, they start chasing beta and they start buying small cap companies, right? NASDAQ trade is going well, S&P 500 trade is going well. And then towards the end of froth, right? And I would argue that we have seen some froth and excess in legacy, not so much crypto yet, but we'll get to that. People in legacy and TradFi world, they begin to redeploy some of their extra liquidity into small cap companies like IWM. They begin to chase beta, and then you see, this rotation into small caps, kind of like we saw last cycle. And at the same time, IWM is outperforming the NASDAQ. Bitcoin also catches some love. Now, why is that, right? Well, the reason for that is that even though Bitcoin to us is a safe investment, it's second nature, no big deal. For a lot of people out there, it's still sort of like the ugly redheaded stepchild of the financial institutions of the investing world. So it's sort of like when things get really hot and people really want to turbocharge beta. Not only do they redeploy extra liquidity into IWM or small cap stocks, which they perceive as safer, I don't. Then they really start chasing beta and they start throwing money at more speculative, in their minds, more speculative investments like Bitcoin or maybe ETH. Now let's add on one additional pair here. One of my favorites. This here is others dominance. You guys know we've talked about this one before. So here's Bitcoin. I can relabel these just so we can stay organized. Now we've got so much that we're looking at. So this is IWM, so small and mid caps, and then small and mid caps divided by mega cap tech. And then here's Bitcoin. I'll just keep them green. You guys can see it just fine. And then this is others dominance. So this is in crypto right here. This is basically your altcoin dominance. We've talked about this. For those that have followed the channel for a while, you definitely know what this is. When this is going up, it just means that small and mid cap altcoins, okay, not stocks. I know we were just talking about that up here for IWM. Small and mid cap altcoins are gaining or stealing market share from the top 10 by market cap. Okay, so this is alt season. When you see this is alt season, right? This is when like all your alts are going crazy. All right. So what did we see last cycle? We saw that same 1, 2, 3 pattern play out where you put in your altcoin bear market bottom, and then you saw a nice recovery, and then Bitcoin goes up to all-time highs, and then you see others dominance, so altcoins bleed back into Bitcoin, but the important part to note here is it puts in a high time frame. Higher low. Right? So what are we seeing right now? Potentially the same thing. 1, 2, 3, high time frame, higher low, right? I believe that bottom has been set. And we definitely shouldn't get below that if my thesis is correct. And I've published other videos on this. So, seeing the Russell performing like it is right now and potentially breaking away heading into price discovery tells me that, we might actually be on the verge of crypto kind of going crazy here, right? Like we're seeing more or less what we've seen every other cycle, which is the NASDAQ is leading and is in price discovery, been chatting aggressively. Bitcoin stuck under the previous all-time high, just like it was in, November of 2020. Others dominance is printing the same structure that it did, right around this time when Bitcoin was stuck under the previous all-time high. And then the most important key to all of this is, this chart right here. It's the potential bottom that we just saw on small cap and mid cap equity market companies paired against that of mega cap tech. And if that is the case, then we might, be halfway through our cycle. And that's a really important thing to be able to tell. And it's an interesting spot to where we may be topped out here as well. Like you can see that over here in 2020, 2021, like this cycle, we came back up and filled in this, this inefficiency, right? So we got our like crypto bull market right here. Bitcoin goes into price discovery, right? Altcoins, we get alt season. and IWM against the Russell came back up and filled in, this inefficiency over here. So if this is the case, I'd probably be targeting, maybe something like around here, or maybe, we get up in here. And that could potentially tell you when, we have reached like peak mania, peak excess. But I just found it to be very interesting, right? That like the Russell has been performing so well recently, and it does line up more or less perfectly. It lines up more or less perfectly with what we would expect and what we've seen historically in previous cycles. So just doing a little bit of additional TA here on the Russell, because again, this is really important. Like historically, the Russell rallies in one of two situations. It shows a lot of strength when everything's about to nuke, or when we're probably halfway through a cycle and we're about to see mania. But I'll put Bitcoin down here a little bit. I think this chart looks really, really solid. Like what we're seeing right now is, in my opinion, like the epitome of strength, like really, really clean range right here. I'll go down to the lower time frames here. We'll go to the 3-day. And then what we saw here was, basically a reestablishment of value or chop solidation for a long time, or reacceptance for small caps back up into this important region right here. You call this a little like bullish channel vertical accumulation, and now we've broken to the upside. And that's actually very similar to what we saw over here right before we went into price discovery for everything, right? So very similar little channel right over here, just under the previous high. And then again, I'll just add on Bitcoin here as an additional point of confluence. I already showed you this, but just to clear the chart up a little bit. And then finally, they both kind of go into, you can see the Russell went into price discovery a little bit before Bitcoin, but more or less when the Russell was beginning to really heat up, and it's never going to be perfect, that is when Bitcoin really begins to go. Like that is when excess and mania truly begins. So it's hard to say exactly when that will happen, but I recognize the structure. And from a cyclical timing perspective, seeing some of those NASDAQ gains in liquidity show a little bit of love to small caps in legacy land, it makes perfect sense contextually with where Bitcoin is pinned and what we're seeing right now in crypto. So if it means anything, my analysis is suggesting that this is bullish for crypto, and it's bullish for altcoins, and that when the Russell goes into price discovery, or damn near it here in the not too distant future, it should transfer over into crypto, again, adding an additional bit of confluence to my bullish thesis. But guys, that's all I got for you today. Thanks so much for tuning in. I know we usually just talk about crypto, but a lot of people have noticed that the IWM or Russell 2000 has been performing very well. So I think it made sense to talk about it today. Before you guys leave, just a reminder, please like and also subscribe. And last but not least, check out the links in the description below. First link is where you can go to our website and sign up for our Discord. Right now, what you could expect is over 2 hours a day of private live voice calls with the entire BB team and community. We talk about setups, analysis, trade ideas, things that we don't cover here publicly on YouTube or on X. You get full transparency. You get to see all of my positions and the rest of the BB team. Truly an unparalleled experience. And additionally, within the next few weeks, you're going to get free access to our new flagship product called the BB Terminal, guys. It's got portfolio tracking, derivatives data, heat maps, high time frame indicators, literally everything that you can need or want to succeed in these markets, all conveniently packaged into one super website. And again, that's going to be given to you for free, included in your Discord membership. So get in sooner rather than later. Second link in the description below is to BB Academy. If you want to learn to do TA and understand how these markets move, high time frame, mid time frame, low time frame, from me and the entire Because Bitcoin team, we compiled all of our strategies that we have basically accrued over cumulatively decades, successfully navigating these markets, and compiled it into one convenient package for you guys. I truly will say this, I don't think there's a better course out there. There's a lot of people teaching TA, some paid, some for free. We do a lot for free, but if you want to save a lot of time and just have everything conveniently packaged and expedite your journey towards understanding these markets from a technical and fundamental perspective, the BB Academy is for you. So definitely check that out. Second link in the description below. But guys, thanks so much for being here. Please like and subscribe, and we will see you next time. Take care.